是有很多香港的媒体、内地的媒体，还有日本的媒体，今日来てくださってありがとうございます。So we will start by having a video to introduce what CUSEF, the China United States Exchange Foundation, will do, and then we will invite today's main speaker. Let's go to the video first. Thank you.
The China United States Exchange Foundation has a mission to build trust and create confidence so that peace, progress, and prosperity are accessible to everyone. Year-round, we bring young Americans to China from top colleges such as Harvard, Columbia, Georgetown, Chicago, and Johns Hopkins, and in partnership with historically black colleges and universities. Through CUSEF, these students see and hear China firsthand, and for some, it's their first time outside of the US. The next generation is important to us through our education programs and as part of the Hong Kong Forum, the annual gathering co-hosted by CUSEF and CCIEE. High-level personalities will lead an open debate on the issues informing two countries and the global humanity they shape. More broadly, we have two digital platforms to ensure that everyone everywhere can participate. The China Current, where we tell the China and Hong Kong story, and China-US Focus, where we connect Chinese and American thought leaders. We believe that to engage people meaningfully, we need a great story and authentic storytellers. The China Current is told by a group of international talent, top content creators who live and work in China with experiences of their own to share. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we sat down with leaders in the international response because we feel a calling to public service that is in line with our programs, Hong Kong Forum, and Digital Plus. On social media, the China Current has 1 million followers, and China-US Focus has another 1.5 million. Our videos on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter feature interviews with Joseph Nye, Larry Summers, Wang Jisi, Ambassador Cui Tiankai, and Ambassador He Yafei, and the last interview with the late Ezra Vogel here in dialogue with Jia Qingguo. But one of the most special is when we traveled to Atlanta exactly 40 years after normalization to speak with President Jimmy Carter.
I have one last question, President Carter. For so long, the world has asked so much of you. What do you ask of us?
What I want from the Chinese people is to stay as friends with mutual respect with the United States. We're the two most powerful countries on earth, and China is becoming even more powerful as the years go by.
End of the Earth, The Journey of the Shanghai Jews is a film we made about the refugees from Europe who escaped Hitler's Holocaust, found safety in China, and became American citizens after the war. At the heart of the China United States Exchange Foundation is Mr. Tong Chi-hua. With his example and legacy in mind, we have a mission and an opportunity to help people everywhere to unlock their potential and fulfill their promise.
Okay, so an exciting video. So now let's welcome today's main speaker, Mr. James Chow, President of the China United States Exchange Foundation, also known as CUSEF, to talk about our plan. Mr. Chow, please.
Oh. Take a photo first.
Yeah. Okay, photo time first. Let's.
You can stand there.
大家可以影一影相先。好。
呢個雞橫身仔，左喐，我喐你哋。好。再傾過係。Good director.
They are very particular about the angle of the photo. 我電視機嗰啲都 OK 咯。OK。
Thank you very much. So grateful that everyone is here. It's been a pretty important 24 hours in the world, not only in America, but it reminds me very much in this role as president of the China-United States Exchange Foundation, just how critical what we do as two countries, as two peoples, and the alliance between them really does matter to the entire humanity. I think I'll start off with a few words over here. A lot of people have asked me, and I'm sure you're going to ask me again about my comments on the US presidential election. And I would say this, I would say that QCEF is honored and has the great privilege to work with whoever is in power in the United States. We look at the presidents, be they Democrat or Republican, as an opportunity to open up the pathway for exchanges, to allow us to do our work in the four ways that we do our work, which is dialogue, education, culture, and also the global goals. And we're so excited that many of the people who influence and inform public policy and public understanding will be here in our great city of Hong Kong next week for the first bilateral event in the world since the presidential election. We have, I think at the last count, 53 speakers now, and they come from the US, China, and what we call global stakeholders, leaders from other countries who have the clarity and also the vision to help us broker an improved relationship with one another. And I'm very, very excited to be able to share with everybody here, because I've only heard in the last 15 minutes that His Excellency Muhammad Yunus, who is the head of the government of Bangladesh and leader of 173 million people, will be addressing the US-China Hong Kong Forum in his role as a head of government. It is extremely important that at this time of uncertainty and fragility, not only in the US and China and their relationship, but uncertainty everywhere in the world, that we use leaders of great moral values and great leadership skills like Professor Muhammad Yunus, whose track record as a Nobel Peace Prize winner and now as the head of government of Bangladesh allows us to believe that there is always hope on the horizon, and that for the US and China too, that hope lives strong. Our speakers, as I said, come from so many different countries, including Indonesia, India, Colombia, the Netherlands, UK, Australia, Chile, of course, so many from Hong Kong itself, and the best from the mainland and from the United States. From the United States, we have Charlene Barjewski, who was a key figure in China's entry to the World Trade Organization when President Clinton was in office. And of course, now the very new chair of the National Committee on US-China Relations. From China, I believe the person who is so important will be Vice Minister Lu Kang from the International Department of the CPC Central Committee. Also joining him will be Ambassador Cui Tiankai, Ambassador Zhou Wenzhong, both of them former vice foreign ministers of the People's Republic of China, and other seminal figures like Yang Jiemian and Bi Jingquan and Hu Xiaolian, who was the deputy governor of the People's Bank of China. So whether we look at finance or trade or politics or diplomacy or civil society, we really believe that this is going to be a stunning gathering of people that really speaks to the value of QCEF's convening powers and how we're able to get the very best people in the room for the singular purpose of improving all humanity, not just the US and China, and at this very, very critical moment. This moment is particularly special. It is, of course, not only 10 days, or will be 10 days after the presidential election when we meet next Friday, but also 1 year after President Biden and President Xi Jinping met in San Francisco and established what we all call the San Francisco Vision, and of course 45 years since normalization of diplomatic ties. So at this year's meeting, we think it highly appropriate that we pay tribute to our friend and our ally, President Jimmy Carter, the co-architect of normalization with Mr. Deng Xiaoping exactly 45 years ago. We will also be paying tribute to Dr. Henry Kissinger, who of course passed away about 11 months ago and was an honorary advisor of this great organization from its founding in 2008 until his passing in 2023. And we're very proud that we had 3 US presidential families that will be represented at this gathering. The family of President Richard Nixon, the family of President George H.W. Bush, and a representative of the Carter family who will be traveling from Atlanta, Georgia, which of course is not just a very, very important place during this presidential election, but the Carter Center is the living legacy of the work, the dreams, and the ambitions for a better world of Mrs. Carter and President Carter. Of course, you can't forget that President Carter is now 100 years old. So even though he is 100 years old, it reminds us of our commitment and our duty to young people in China, in America, everywhere. And that speaks to the value of CUSEF's work. As I said, no matter who is in office in the White House, we work with those people. And we work with everybody who is serious, credible, and shares our concern for the human condition. As for President Carter, it reminds us that we need to do more with young people. So this conference will be the first in our 5 annual meetings where we'll be having a parallel youth forum. We have brilliant young people who will not only be joining in the audience, but will be up on stage. So CUSEF will be linking the voice of young people with the voice of established political leadership. And that excites me very, very much. I could speak more and more, but I'm sure you have better questions and I have comments to make. So I'm very, very happy to take any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, so we are in the media question section. If you have any question, please raise your hand and we'll have mic delivered to you. Please also state which media you're coming from. 問題咧就可以係主要係英文，不過如果你想用中文咧都冇問題，咁我會嘗試翻譯嘅。日本語でも全然大丈夫です。私が翻訳するので。Okay, so any questions? The gentleman there in the second row.
Hello, reporter from China Daily, I'm Nick. My question is, what potential impacts might this election result have on the relationship between Hong Kong and the United States? Could you give us some examples?
Thanks a lot, Nick. I thought you were going to come up with the US-China question, but I suppose we are in Hong Kong and we are hosting the Hong Kong Forum, and it's an excellent way for us to pivot about our home, our great home of Hong Kong. I think that Hong Kong has had a very, very rough ride for a number of years and unfortunately has been placed in a position where it's got caught up in the US-China relationship. But I often see this as a very positive outcome if we look at the longer term future. Sure, at this time it's very hard, and we are primarily a city that is known as being an international center for trade, for commerce, for finance, and now increasingly for arts and culture. But I think this is the opportunity where the people of Hong Kong can really rise to this challenge of being the cultural interpreters between the United States and China. The United States and China don't share a spoken language. They don't share a written language, but they share a relationship, even though it's declined quite shockingly over the last 10 years almost. And I think where Hong Kong comes in is as a known quantity, a trusted city and region. I mean, I think back very much to the gift that Hong Kong was given of one country, two systems, but also Hong Kong as a city that's blessed to be a global city, an international city that can not only speak English and Chinese, but also understands what people are thinking and can be that very fluid go-between. So the impact on Hong Kong is already there. It's a serious impact. We get caught up in the greatest political contest of this century. But the opportunity here is that it makes us important and relevant all over again. Because if we take this the right way, the people of Hong Kong will now find a new role as that go-between between the world's two biggest economies. And I think that's not only a great honor, but that's a very, very important role to play in this 21st century.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? The lady at the back.
Hi, Mr. Joe, reporter from Bohemian Magazine. And I have a question is that which areas of cooperation between China and the U.S. do you see as the most promising after this U.S. presidential election?
Oh, wow. I could answer the first part, and then you said, now that we've got this presidential election. So let me take that in two parts. I will answer more broadly, and even though I come from health and I come from a background in HIV and AIDS, infectious diseases, I will say that the greatest opportunity for partnership is climate change, because the planet is going to survive no matter what. But we, humanity, we have a history of not listening and not learning, being rather arrogant. So I'm worried very much that we humans will not survive, even if our planet survives. So I think the one of urgency, but also the one of opportunity, really is climate action to reverse the impact of global warming as the two biggest carbon dioxide emitters in the world, as the two biggest economies in the world, but also as two countries that have worked actually pretty well on climate change over the past number of years, especially when you look back to 2015 when the COP21 conference took place in Paris, and the US and China really worked hard to establish the rules and the vision and the guidelines of the Paris Climate Agreement. We're so happy that at this conference we will have the former chief climate negotiator for China, Mr. Su Wei, and also the former chief climate negotiator of India, the former Foreign Secretary, Shams Saran. I think that is hugely significant that we have both of them in the room together with our American partners at the same time talking about climate and health. But I think climate may have a very difficult go of it under a different administration. If we look back to the past, climate change was a difficult issue. Was a contentious one over in the US. What I am really hopeful, though, is for global health. I think all our problems have come out in the open due to the pandemic that was COVID-19. It brought out the worst in humanity, but also brought out the best in science and global health. And I think that the United States has been a very, very effective and powerful leader over, well, at least since the Second World War onwards. And everyone's going to be looking to America now for that same moral leadership that it has exercised so well for so many decades. I think global health and its leadership in global health, and if it continues that leadership in global health, including in areas in HIV and AIDS, which it has done so remarkably well on, saving the lives of millions of people, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, that's an easy way and a quick way to reassure the world that it is serious about its leadership morally and its leadership in global health particularly. And I have every confidence that they will look at that seriously and move on that. So climate change, global health security. I'd also talk very much about financial stability. When you look at the early results from this election and what people are saying, they've been talking about how the economy has perhaps been the single issue that they voted on and voted for. And I think that says something more deeply about the American people. When they want more financial stability, that also means that they want lower costs of food, of energy, of drinks, of the very things that sustain us as human beings. They want everything that we want around the world, including and especially in China, which is a better life for themselves, a better life for their children, and a better life for their children's children. They want to lower the cost of living. They want to have more disposable income. They want to have job security. They want to have job creation. And those goals are complex and nuanced, but they're also very simple. And I think that American dream also speaks to what Chinese people want. I've lived in Hong Kong and in Beijing for all my adult life, and I've seen for myself how mothers and fathers, grandfathers and grandmothers want the best for their children and their grandchildren. And I think that's a very, very Chinese characteristic, that you want the next generation to do better than yourself. So when I look at economic stability and their partnership for growing economies and for stabilizing the global economy, I think more simply not of public policy, not of markets and figures and numbers. I just think of the ordinary family, the good, honest, hardworking families in the US and in China who want something better tomorrow than they have right now today.
Thank you. 廣州嗰邊。
廣州地想問下咧就係香港啦，同埋嗰個我哋廣州啦、深圳啦，都係我哋國家嘅大灣區嘅城市。咁啊，大灣區都係全世界可以講話，粵港澳大灣區係全世界講係出口嘅經濟最強勁嘅一個區域。咁啊，President Trump 當選咗之後咧，佢有可能會加稅。咁啊，想問下作為我哋嘅香港嘅中美呢個友好嘅一個組織咧，可唔可以就喺呢一方面溝通我哋中美之間，可唔可以幫助下大灣區，即係喺避免一啲貿易戰啊，或者係幫助包括香港同埋我哋成個大灣區經濟出口。
Okay, so the question is about Hong Kong and Guangzhou belongs to the Greater Bay Area, and which is one of the largest exporting area. But President Trump has said that after he would be elected, he would raise the tariff on China. So as an organization or communication between US and China, is there anything we can do to stop this protectionism?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's a critical period, and it's now. It's now, meaning mid-November to January 2025, when the inauguration happens. So, of course, it's President-elect Trump will become President Trump in about 2 months or so from now. But this period of around 8 weeks is critical because everyone's already getting to work. The president-elect is going to be choosing his cabinet right now, but also forming the ideas, whether that includes tariffs or not. First of all, I think we all know here in this room that conditions change very quickly, and what a candidate says on the political campaign trail could be very different to what is actually enacted once they take office. Secondly, I think how the two countries reach out to each other, and the important NGOs like QSEF, like our organization, is really important in these 8 weeks, because I think everyone should be focused on stabilizing the relationship so that it doesn't experience any sudden drops or changes until January. You do not want to start the first day of a new administration on a negative tone. In fact, you want to build the narrative now so that come inauguration day and the 6 months, for example, after that, we're swimming into a period of constructive momentum where you actually have partnership and collaboration, and are asking questions like the reporter asked there about what are the fronts for collaboration that you could have. That's the conversation that we want to have as countries and people, and that's the conversation that we will be crafting, championing, and pushing at this US-China Hong Kong Forum, which is why when I talk about this period of stabilization, and it's beyond tariffs, it can go much further into other areas, which is why I think when we talk about stabilization, what we do at this US-China Hong Kong Forum is more than just a conference. I don't usually use the word conference to describe it. I usually use the word our annual meeting. Annual because we happen every year, and we happen around the same time every November. But meeting because it's not another conference in Hong Kong. It is a unique working meeting for people where they come here giving us their best ideas, and QSEF has its own narrative and its own position on many of these issues. And together we craft a narrative, and at the very end of the meeting on the 16th of November, it finishes on the 16th, we will end with what we call policy recommendations. So all the principal speakers and participants will be gathered in one of the rooms, and they will be drawing up policy recommendations together that makes sense for their countries and their people, but also given the spirit of collaboration that we brought together on. And we will be passing along those recommendations to the two governments as well. So whilst people have been speculating about tariffs, not only between the US and China, but even between the EU and China, I think the room for speculation should be held in a careful space. I can't speculate, or I can, but not necessarily with accuracy, and neither can any of us here in this room, because the only person who really knows will be the gentleman who takes office in January as the next president of the United States of America. And I have hope that as a successful leader in business who has always looked at what's been in the best interests of his country, he will also look at the big vision for trade with China, the second biggest economy in the world, that you could say is its closest competitor, but I think also its closest partner, and that potential for partnership. I think Mr. Trump is always has the big vision in mind, and his skills in business, he'll be thinking like a businessman on that day as well. And China is good business.
Thank you， 我好快咁整理一下啦。咁佢呢幾個月其實特朗普咧，其實都仲係選緊呢個內閣成員。咁所以喺呢幾個月咧，要形成呢一個論述咧，一個好嘅論述咧係非常重要嘅。咁喺11月15號、16號上面嘅 Hong Kong Forum 咧，咁所有嘅嘉賓咧，到最後咧就會做一個叫做政策嘅建議，咁亦都係會提交俾呢啲政府嘅。咁就特朗普先生咧係一個商人，咁而中國咧就係一個好好嘅商機，咁所以都係有希望嘅。咁any questions？ 中文也可以的，後面有沒有問題？如果沒有的話，就是China Daily 還有。
So this question is about U.S. and China relationship. I mean, as an organization aiming for a peaceful and friendly relationship between the two countries, are you seeing more challenges that Donald Trump's victory this time brought to the relationship between the two countries? And yeah, so this is the first question.
Okay, so I will say that everything's going to be different. Everything's always different. Life is all about change. President Obama campaigned on a mandate of change. I'll make 2 points over here. First of all, the reality is that the next president is President Donald Trump. And I would like to say here also that people have asked often, who was the preferred candidate before, but nobody decides that unless you're an American citizen of voter eligibility. And we're an NGO, so we don't look at that aspect of things. However, China has worked with not only a Republican administration, but a Trump-led Republican administration for 4 whole years. And that gives China and the United States this invaluable experience of having spent almost half a decade working together. And nothing replaces that in-person contact and the one-on-one interactions that they had for those 4 years. The second point I would add when we think about QCEF and what we do as a non-profit, non-governmental and independent platform is that's the value we have. As I said earlier, no matter who is in the White House, we're there. No matter whether it's rain or shine in the political weather, we're there. Whether you curb trade or people-to-people diplomacy on either side, we're there. And we're a steadying, consistent, and influential factor in the US-China relationship. And that excites me when I listen to your question, because change is always quite good, and not necessarily political office change, but meaning that we have found that even in the hardest times during the pandemic, we went online and engaged with our students online, including our African American students at historically black colleges and universities. When we came out of the pandemic, QCEF was the first to bring a university from America to China, including Hong Kong, and that was the delegation of students from Montana. When they announced the 50,000 student program exactly 12 months ago in San Francisco, QCEF was the first to bring them, and they came from the university, Columbia University, from the School of International and Public Affairs. So we bring quality students, students who are invested in a better world through the United States and China. And we bring them at the right moments and the right times. And we don't plan for it as such. We don't think 50,000 program, let's find a delegation who can come here in 5 weeks' time. It doesn't work like that. You only get results and outcomes when you do this work year in, year out. So I am particularly proud of, I've only been president for a year and a half, so it's not my work, but it's the work of my team, who have been working here for 16 years, who have a 16-year track record on working in US-China relations impactfully, come rain or shine. And I think you mentioned the word peace. I think that was one of the first words that we heard from Beijing when President Trump was elected, about peaceful coexistence being one of the 3 principles that they want to continue guiding this relationship along. I think more simply, not in government language, but maybe in our simple NGO language, living together in peace sounds like a pretty good idea right now. And if we can live together in peace and achieve a new peace at a time when there's scores of war occurring, not only in Ukraine and Russia, but also, of course, with in the Middle East, but in places like Syria and Yemen, we forget those wars, we forget those conflicts. And when we forget those wars and conflicts, we're actually forgetting people just like you and I, but who don't have the advantages. And then, of course, there is Hong Kong. We want to make sure that as a Hong Kong-based organization that was created by the very first leader of a new Hong Kong, we want to make sure that our Hong Kong people are up front and center, working for the greatest relationship of our times.
Thank you. Can I just do a quick follow-up? You just mentioned the word change, and I was wondering, could you just name one thing that you want to see the most, and like one change you want to see the most, and the one thing that you don't want to see the most, like after Donald Trump come to power?
Listen. I think they need to all listen a lot more. And I think, Nick, you asked a question which is actually very moving. At this Hong Kong forum, usually we are a people-to-people diplomacy leader. We bring students around, we engage in dialogue, we convene, we do all these things that people know. We work in dialogue, education, culture, and global challenges. But you often find when you go to US-China conferences that even though people-to-people is really important, that everyone says it's important, they actually put it last on the agenda. This year we put it right at the top of our agenda, together with Mohammed Yunus, the head of government, together with the 2 ambassadors, Ambassador Xie Feng and Ambassador Nicholas Burns. We have a very, very special person called Carla Canales. She's not a politician, she's not a business person, she's a mezzo-soprano, she's an opera singer. And the reason why we have her is because we believe that arts and culture is what can move us and what speaks to our civilization and identity. She is also a presidential appointee under the current administration and a US State Department senior advisor. So she has the culture, but she also has the impact and the know-how of how to do things. I met her again a few days ago in Beijing when I went to the United States Embassy, and we're really excited because she's going to give us a masterclass. Now, this is very unusual for any kind of meeting. Usually you have panels and panels and speeches and panels, and this year we said no. We want to have more women up at the top of our program, and we don't only want to have panels and roundtables, we want to have a master class. So a master class is having a master, in this case Carla Canales, come and teach us about something. And she's not going to teach us about singing, but as a singer, she's going to teach us about how to listen and how to communicate with one another. And I ran this idea past, the top people coming from China and the United States, and they all looked at me like I'd gone a bit crazy for a while. But they all said, that's a really, really good idea, because the politicians have been using the same language, the same format, and sometimes the same anger for many years now. And what Carla is going to do is hit the reset button and teach us how to communicate. Next time we'll get a journalist to help us do that, since you're in the communication business.
Thank you. Any other questions? 仲有冇其他問題？前面雙寶。
那个周先生你好，我是香港商报记者，我想问一下，在您看来，这个新的总统上任之后呢，这个中美关系里面，可能会产生最大的一个变化会是在哪个领域？然后会对中国最大的挑战有可能是什么？
Well, sorry, I didn't answer your second question. 刚才我没有回给你的第二个提问，所以差不多一样 about the biggest problem, but also the.
When the new president came in power, which domain will see the most changes, and what challenge do you foresee would be the most difficult?
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball out here. I don't think anyone will agree with me, but I'm going to say it. I think the area of biggest change and biggest improvement or continued improvement, because the current presidential administration has done a great job as well on people to people. Ambassador Nicholas Burns in Beijing has been a fantastic people to people leader throughout his term in office in China. And I think we all want to thank him as a diplomat for using the best of diplomacy to do that. People are worried about people-to-people diplomacy and what's going to happen, because we saw the suspension of some scholarships and study programs under the last Trump administration. But I also see President Trump as a person, and not only as a president and as a business leader, but also as a grandfather. And his grandchildren speak Chinese, and I know that he respects China and our culture very much. And I just have this feeling that in this second run at president, I think he will be very important at opening up more space for people-to-people diplomacy, especially as he sees his grandchildren reach more of a high school and college age. I know that he, like any other grandparent in the world, will be thinking about the human connections that people make and the tenderness and kindness and compassion that underscores great American values. I have lived, as I told you, my entire adult life in China, and I'm very grateful to the opportunities I've been given here in journalist, on television, in health, all these things. They all counted to what I do now. But my love for China is matched by a love for America. And I remember when I was very young, I went to the States when I was working in HIV and AIDS. And I saw for myself the incredible work that ordinary Americans were doing to save lives not only of their own, but of HIV-infected people everywhere in the world, people who they don't even know, people whose faces they've never seen, people whose names they could never tell you. And while I think generosity and values like freedom are not restricted to one country, and no one country holds the freehold on that, I do believe that there's something very unique about American generosity, because I've seen it up close and in person. And I see also that generosity in our own country in China, and within that in Hong Kong. So I have this feeling that President Trump is going to do the right thing and is going to allow people to move forward freely. And I think he's going to do that because I think that he's also a human being, and people forget that he's also a person who has feelings of caring and concern, and maybe he'll see that from within his own family, his own example there. The greatest challenge, I think, will probably be the economy. But if we can get that right, that's going to change lives everywhere. I know all of you think of the economy as data points and as growth figures, but we at QCEF don't only see economic growth for that reason. We look at economic growth in terms of human impact and how it can transform lives for the better. I think this may be the trickiest area, especially since he's spoken of potential tariffs, and because the past has shown us of the scope for potential tariffs and sanctions as well, and that affects Hong Kong very deeply. But I would say that see what happens, not only from now till January, but also don't pay too much attention to the first 6 months. People are still trying to settle into a new job, a new house, literally, a new government. And we also need to give them that space and time and respect to do that. And I would say that what's going to get us through is good old-fashioned values. Respect is a big one. Tolerance is another big one. And also using multi-track dialogue to guide our future negotiations. So we have track 2.0, and what we're very good at is track 1.5. So that's working between non-government and government stakeholders and actors. And I think we need to increasingly use track 2.0 to establish understanding on specific terms, like decoupling, like guardrails. We use these words all the time, but increasingly I found as I've traveled recently to Tokyo, and I was recently also in Washington, Beijing, Shanghai, New York, what I found is that partly because of language, 说中文是说英语, there are actually different understandings of these terms, basic terms, and also there's different cultural understanding of what these terms means. So I think actors in track 2.0 must use that time to establish those definitions and establish those terms so that we can move to track 1.5 and not waste time on trying to determine what those terms mean, and then feed it into government, public policy, government to government.
Thank you, Mr. James Chang. The time is nearly up.
Yeah.
We have time for one last question.
I'm so happy when you ask questions because it makes me feel that you care about the world that we live in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chow. I'm from Now TV News. And as you just said, in the next returning Trump administration, there may be some issues including tariffs and sanctions. So we'd like to ask what impacts do you think that the measures that may be implemented by the next Trump presidency will have on Hong Kong? And more especially, how can Hong Kong deal with the incoming challenges? Thank you.
Well, I don't necessarily think that there are tariffs and sanctions coming up. My speculation isn't worth as much as yours. So I'll be very careful to say that. But for Hong Kong, I think we need to be sophisticated. You know, when I came into this job a year and a half ago, I remember my chairman telling me that you need to sit down and, first of all, deal with the transition. So we had a transition in board and executive leadership. That was the first thing. And then he pushed me and he said, you've now got to sit down and draw up a strategy and then get that approved by the board. And then the third part, and I won't bore you about budgets and all these things, but the third part of that was executing that and bringing that strategy to life. And I think, you know, as Hong Kong, we need to have a very strong plan in place. We then need to make sure that we get all of the relevant stakeholders involved in their buy-in, whether it be Americans or Chinese. And that's not as difficult as it sounds because we have so many Americans living in Hong Kong. They're not only Americans, they are Hong Kongers too. They may look different to you and I ethnically, but they also have invested financially, but more so with their families in our great city. They've moved their families across, they've enrolled their children into school, they trust Hong Kong to be that guiding influence on their early family lives, and of course, they grow their personal wealth while they're here as well. So I see Hong Kongers and new Hong Kongers as being part of this big equation. I think we have a very, very good leader in Mr. John Lee, and we're so grateful that he will be coming to speak at the welcome dinner of the US-China Hong Kong Forum next Friday. And as he did last year, and as has every chief executive done for us, they have helped us ensure that QCEF has a role to play in Hong Kong, so that we're not just an NGO that happens to be in this city, but we're actually a city that uses the best of Hong Kong talent and the best of our international voice in Hong Kong, and that we exercise those rights that we have here and the talent that we have in this incredible city. So I think for Hong Kong, as it tries to negotiate whatever comes up next, I'm not sure what's coming up next because no one knows for sure what's coming up next. But I hope that the best of Hong Kong continues to work with QCEF, continues to work at the US-China Hong Kong Forum, and continues to support the government that we are blessed to have in creating whatever comes up next. And I have no doubt that what the last couple of years has taught us from 2019 and the pandemic of 2020 onwards, Hong Kong has a history of having navigated the greatest challenges in history. Not only COVID, but what about SARS? And because of SARS, we came out as a world leader. Because of the Asian financial crisis, we renewed ourselves and came out as a great global financial leader again. And whilst the last years have not been the easiest or the most straightforward, what it simply tells us is that we should be ready because the best times are coming right up ahead and they're just waiting for us to go out and grab it.
Thank you very much. So this is the end of this press conference. Thank you again for coming. 谢谢大家今天到来。
Where is Nick here? I want to say thank you to them for coming.
Yeah.
They're here?
Yeah. I will.
How are you?